think we got
Idiot
it.
cross-prohibited get
Yeah,
out
that
of the
looks
box.
brilliant.
Alex had
Yeah, that
always
looks
lived a
brilliant.
quiet life. He was the kind of person who didn't take risks. Every day followed the same routine. Wake up, go to work, come home, eat dinner, and sleep. It wasn't an exciting life, but it was safe. He liked it that way. Life in the small town he grew up in didn't offer much in terms of excitement, but Alex had come to accept it. Why risk making waves when everything seemed to work out just fine the way it was? But everything changed the day Alex met Sam. Sam was unlike anyone Alex had ever met. He wasn't from around here, and that much was clear. He didn't follow the rules, didn't care about making a good impression, and seemed to live in a world of his own making. Where most people saw limits, Sam saw possibilities. Where Alex saw barriers, Sam saw opportunities. It happened on a lazy Tuesday afternoon when Alex was having lunch at his usual spot in the corner cafe. Sam walked in, his clothes disheveled, his shoes untied, his hair a wild mess. He walked right up to Alex and without any introduction, sat down across from him. "Mind if I join you?" Sam asked with a grin. Alex, not used to people being so forward, felt a bit uncomfortable but nodded, trying to keep his cool. They exchanged small talk at first. Sam asked about Alex's job, his life, his plans for the future. It was the usual polite conversation, but Alex quickly realized something was different about this man. There was an energy about him that Alex couldn't quite explain. Sam seemed to be asking more questions than answering any, probing deeper into Alex's life, even though they had just met. "So, Alex," Sam said casually, leaning in as if to whisper a secret, "what's your biggest dream?" Alex was taken aback. His biggest dream. He hadn't really thought about that in years. His life had become so predictable that it almost seemed impossible to imagine anything else. But he wasn't about to admit that to this stranger. "I don't know," Alex replied, shrugging. "I guess I just want to live a quiet life." "Stay out of trouble." Sam's eyebrows shot up. "Stay out of trouble? You mean you don't want to do something more with your life? You don't want to take a risk?" Alex was getting uncomfortable now. He didn't like people pushing him to answer questions he wasn't prepared to answer. "I'm fine, really," he said, his tone firm. "I don't need to take any risks. I'm happy with the way things are." But Sam wasn't backing down. He leaned even closer, his eyes intense now. "That's exactly the problem, Alex. You're stuck in your own little box, and you're too afraid to get out of it. You don't even know what you're capable of because you've never tried anything outside of your comfort zone." Alex felt a sudden wave of anger. Who was this guy to tell him he was stuck? What did Sam know about his life? He had worked hard to get where he was. Everything was in order, and now this stranger was telling him he wasn't living right, that he needed to take risks. It was ridiculous. "I don't need your advice," Alex snapped. "I'm fine. I don't need to jump into the unknown just to prove something." Sam didn't seem offended. Instead, he smiled as if he had expected this reaction. "You're right, Alex. You don't need to prove anything to anyone. But let me ask you something. What would happen if you did get out of your box? If you took that one risk just to see what would happen?" Alex shook his head, growing more frustrated. "I don't need to take any risks. That's just stupid." Sam's smile faded, and for the first time there was a seriousness in his voice. "You call it stupid, but deep down you know it's not. You've spent your whole life avoiding anything that scares you, and now all you're doing is wasting time. You're comfortable, but comfort doesn't lead to greatness, Alex. It never does." Alex's heart raced. He had never been challenged like this before. He couldn't think of a response. Sam had put him on the spot in a way no one ever had. He wasn't used to people pushing him like this. And yet, despite his anger, there was something about Sam's words that felt true. Maybe, just maybe, he was right. Maybe he had been playing it too safe. Maybe he was more afraid of failure than he realized. But Alex wasn't ready to admit that to Sam. Not yet. He stood up abruptly, paying for his coffee. "Thanks for the conversation," he muttered before walking out of the cafe, leaving Sam behind. But as Alex walked home, something was different. Sam's words echoed in his mind and he couldn't shake them off. You're stuck in your own little box. What would happen if you took that one risk? He tried to ignore the nagging feeling in his chest, but it only grew stronger as the day wore on. Was Sam right? Was he really just hiding in a box, too afraid to step outside of it? That night, Alex tossed and turned in bed. He couldn't sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Sam's face, that grin, and those words that seemed to cut right through him. Idiot, get out of the box. The next morning, Alex woke up with a new feeling in his chest. It wasn't fear exactly. It was curiosity. A tiny spark of something he hadn't felt in years. Maybe Sam was onto something. Maybe he had been wrong to dismiss the idea of taking risks. Alex stood up from his bed and went to the window. He looked out at the small town he had always called home. The streets were quiet, the world outside was calm, and yet something inside him felt unsettled. Was it possible that he had been living too small a life? Was it time to try something new? It was ridiculous, he thought. He had always been fine, but Sam's challenge still hung in the air like a question he couldn't ignore. What if? With a sigh, Alex turned away from the window. He wasn't ready to make any decisions yet. But something had changed inside him. He wasn't sure what it was, but he knew one thing for certain. His life wasn't going to stay the same after this. For the next few days, Alex tried to push Sam's challenge out of his mind. He went back to his usual routine, waking up, going to work, coming home, eating dinner, and going to bed. Everything was back to normal, or so he thought. But the more Alex tried to ignore it, the more Sam's words echoed in his head. You're stuck in your own little box, Sam had said. What would happen if you took that one risk? Alex couldn't stop thinking about it. He tried to stay focused on his work at the office, but even there, the thought of being stuck in a box followed him. It was like Sam had planted a seed in his mind that refused to stop growing. Every time Alex made a decision, no matter how small, he began to ask himself, is this because it's comfortable, or is it because it's the right thing to do? He couldn't stop asking these questions, and it frustrated him. He had always prided himself on being practical, on being careful. There was nothing wrong with playing it safe, was there? But now, every time he took a step, there was this nagging feeling that maybe Sam had been right. Maybe he had been hiding from life, hiding from what was possible out of fear. Alex tried to talk to his friends about it, hoping they could reassure him and tell him that he was doing fine, that there was no need to change anything. But instead of reassuring him, their reactions made him even more uncertain. Risk. You mean like quitting your job or something? His friend Ryan asked, laughing as if the idea was ridiculous. Alex hesitated. I don't know, something like that. Maybe just, trying something new, getting out of this rut. Ryan raised an eyebrow. Dude, your life is good. You're comfortable. Why would you want to mess that up? You've got everything you need. Alex tried to nod along, but the words didn't sit right with him. He felt like his life was so neatly wrapped up in a comfortable package that he'd stopped living. He was going through the motions, but was he really living? Another night, Alex talked to his sister, Lucy, about it. He knew she was a little more open-minded than his friends. Maybe she would understand what he was feeling. I don't know, Luce, he said, pacing around his living room. I'm just tired of always playing it safe, I want to do something different, something that scares me. But I don't know where to start. I'm afraid I'll mess everything up. Lucy, who was always the adventurous one, looked at him with a knowing smile. It's okay to feel scared. But the worst thing you can do is let that fear control you. You've been stuck in your safe little box for so long that it feels like the only way to live. But it's not. Life is meant to be lived, not to be survived. But what if I fail? Alex blurted out. What if everything goes wrong? What if I ruin everything? Lucy's smile faded and she stepped toward him, placing a hand on his shoulder. Alex, failure isn't the end of the world. It's part of the journey. It's how we grow. Don't let the fear of failing keep you from trying. The real failure is not even attempting. Her words hit him hard. He had always been so afraid of failure that he'd spent his whole life trying to avoid it. But by avoiding failure, he was also avoiding the possibility of success, of growth, and of truly experiencing life. That night, Alex couldn't sleep. He lay awake in bed, his mind racing. He thought about his job, his friendships, his quiet life. It was safe, predictable. He didn't take risks because he was afraid of losing control. But was that really living? In the dark, Alex turned over his thoughts, trying to make sense of everything. He didn't want to be stuck in this endless loop of comfort and routine. But he also didn't want to throw everything away in some reckless pursuit of excitement. There had to be a balance, right? The next morning, as he stood in front of the mirror, getting ready for work, Alex decided to do something different. He wasn't sure exactly what it would be, but he knew he needed to stop being so afraid. He needed to take a step towards something bigger than just the same old, same old. He took a deep breath and called his boss. "Hey, I need to talk about something. I've been thinking and I'm ready for a new challenge. Maybe it's time for a change. I'm ready to try something outside of my comfort zone." His boss was quiet for a moment. "You've been with us for years, Alex. What's going on? Are you unhappy?" "No, it's not that. I just feel like I'm stuck. I need something different, something that pushes me." Alex paused, feeling his heart beat faster as he waited for his boss to respond. "All right, I understand," his boss said after a long pause. "We can talk about some new projects. If you're ready, let's find something that challenges you. But just remember, sometimes stepping outside of your comfort zone isn't always easy." Alex smiled, feeling a little lighter. For the first time in a long while, he felt like he was taking control of his own life. It was a small step, but it felt huge. He didn't know what would happen next, but he was ready to find out. Later that day, as he sat at his desk, Alex found himself staring out the window. He thought about everything he had been through in the last week. Sam's words still echoed in his mind, but now they felt like a call to action, not a burden. Maybe it was time to stop hiding from what scared him. When the clock struck 5, Alex left work with a sense of determination he hadn't felt in years. He didn't know what risks lay ahead, but he was going to take them. He was going to step out of the box and see what the world had to offer. That night, Alex sat in his favorite chair with a cup of coffee. He looked around his apartment, which had become so familiar, so comfortable. It had all the things he needed, but now it felt different. It felt like a place he had outgrown. The world outside his door was vast, and it was waiting for him to explore. He smiled to himself, thinking of Lucy's words. "The worst thing you can do is let fear control you." As Alex sat there in the quiet of the evening, he made a decision. He was going to try. Even if it meant failing, he would take the risk. He would step outside the box, just like Sam had said. And for the first time in a long time, Alex felt excited about the future. Alex had made up his mind. He was going to step out of his comfort zone. But as soon as he said it to himself, a wave of doubt washed over him. Was he really ready? What did that even mean, stepping out of his comfort zone? He had no idea where to start or what to do, but there was no turning back now. He'd made the decision, and now he had to follow through. The next morning, Alex woke up with a mix of excitement and nervousness. It felt like the first day of a whole new life, and he didn't even know what that life would look like. He quickly got dressed and headed out for his usual morning walk, the one thing in his routine that never changed. The air was cool and the streets were empty, just the way he liked it. But today, something felt different. It was like the world around him was waiting for him to make his move. That day, instead of going to the office as usual, Alex did something he hadn't done in years. He took a day off. It wasn't because he was tired or needed a break. It was because he wanted to challenge himself. He wanted to do something that scared him, something that would make him uncomfortable. But what? As Alex sat in his small apartment, sipping his coffee and staring at the blank walls, he realized just how much of his life had been lived on autopilot. Every decision, every habit, every day had been carefully crafted to avoid anything risky, anything uncertain. But now he was staring at the blank canvas of his own life, wondering what kind of masterpiece he could create. He opened his laptop and began researching. He searched for things that might push him outside of his box. The internet was full of exciting possibilities, new hobbies, career paths, even adventures. But each idea felt a little too big, a little too far from where he was. Alex wasn't ready to quit his job and move to a different city, and he wasn't ready to climb Mount Everest or learn how to surf. He needed something smaller, something he could dip his toes into without feeling overwhelmed. That's when he stumbled across an advertisement for a public speaking course. The idea struck him like a lightning bolt. Public speaking was one of his greatest fears. Every time he had to speak in front of a group, his hands would shake, his heart would race, and his mind would go blank. It was the kind of fear that held him back in so many areas of his life. But what if he could face that fear? What if he could be good at it? Without overthinking it, Alex clicked the link and signed up for the course. His heart was pounding in his chest as he hit submit, but he didn't back out. He had made his decision, and there was no turning back now. For the first time in years, Alex felt a sense of excitement mixed with fear. He was about to do something he had always avoided, and it felt like stepping off a cliff. The course was set to begin the following week, and Alex tried to distract himself in the meantime by doing some small tasks around his apartment. He went grocery shopping, reorganized his closet, and even baked a cake, something he had never tried before. It wasn't much, but each small task made him feel like he was starting to take control of his life. It was all part of breaking out of the box he had built around himself. When the day of the public speaking course arrived, Alex was nervous, but he couldn't help feeling a little proud of himself for taking the leap. He dressed carefully, wore a shirt he felt confident in, and even practiced a few deep breaths in the mirror before he left. The whole time, his heart raced in his chest, but the excitement pushed the fear aside. He was doing it. He was finally doing something he never thought he could. The course was held in a small, modern building just outside of town. When Alex arrived, he noticed a few other people entering, all looking a little nervous just like him. They didn't look like the typical confident, outgoing types, just regular people who were all here for the same reason: to improve their public speaking skills. Alex felt a small sense of comfort in that. The instructor, Ms. Thompson, greeted them warmly at the door. She was older, with a friendly smile and a calm demeanor. She immediately put everyone at ease with her gentle voice and encouraging words. "Welcome, everyone," she said. "I know most of you are probably feeling nervous, and that's completely normal. Public speaking is something we all fear at first, but by the end of this course, you'll feel confident and ready to speak in front of any crowd. Trust me, you'll be amazed at how much you can grow in just a few weeks." Alex took a seat in the back of the room, trying to hide his shaking hands under the desk. He didn't want anyone to see how nervous he was, but as the class went on, he began to feel a little better. Thompson's exercises were simple but effective. She asked them to introduce themselves, share a funny story, and even read a short passage aloud. With each exercise, Alex's fear slowly started to subside. The people in the class were supportive, and there was no judgment. Over the next few weeks, Alex found himself growing more confident with each class. The exercises became more challenging, but he didn't back down. He felt a sense of accomplishment every time he stood up in front of the group and spoke, even though his heart still raced. He could feel himself breaking out of his shell, little by little. One day, Ms. Thompson announced that they would have to give a final presentation at the end of the course. It would be their chance to showcase everything they had learned. Alex's stomach dropped. This was it, the moment he had been dreading. For the next few days, he couldn't stop thinking about it. He started to panic. What if he messed up? What if he froze? What if he made a fool of himself in front of everyone? But then he remembered why he had signed up for this course in the first place. This was his chance to prove to himself that he could face his fears. He couldn't back out now. He had already come so far. The day of the final presentation arrived. Alex arrived early to prepare, his nerves on edge but his determination stronger than his fear. He took a deep breath as he walked into the room, his heart pounding in his chest. When his turn finally came, Alex stood up in front of the class, the notes for his presentation shaking in his hands. But something was different. The fear was still there, but it wasn't as overwhelming as it had been before. He took a deep breath, looked around the room, and began to speak. At first his voice wavered, but with each sentence he grew more confident. He remembered the techniques Ms. Thompson had taught him: breathing, pacing, eye contact, and he began to apply them. The more he spoke, the more comfortable he became. By the time he finished, the class was silent for a moment, and then they erupted into applause. Alex couldn't believe it. He had done it. He had faced his biggest fear and survived. Not only that, but he had done well. For the first time in his life, he realized something important. The fear was never as bad as he imagined. It was just a barrier, a wall he had built in his mind, and once he broke through it, he discovered that the world on the other side wasn't nearly as scary as he had thought. As he left the class that day, Alex felt like a new person. He had taken the leap. He had faced his fear of public speaking and conquered it. The feeling of accomplishment was unlike anything he had ever experienced. He realized that sometimes the scariest thing is simply taking the first step, but once you do, the rest of the journey becomes a little easier. And for the first time in years, Alex felt alive. After Alex's public speaking course, something inside him shifted. He had stepped out of his comfort zone and survived, but more than that, he had actually thrived. He had faced his fear, and rather than breaking him, it had built him up in ways he hadn't imagined. He began to see things differently now. Life didn't have to be predictable or safe. There were so many things he had kept himself from trying, simply because he was too afraid of failure. But now he understood that failure wasn't the end, it was just part of the process. Over the next few weeks, Alex continued to push himself further. It wasn't always easy, and sometimes the fear still crept in, whispering in the back of his mind. But now he had tools to deal with it. He had learned to look fear in the face and move forward anyway. It wasn't about being fearless. It was about being brave enough to act despite the fear. One afternoon, as Alex was browsing through the local newspaper, he came across an advertisement for an upcoming improv acting class. At first, he hesitated. He remembered his old self, the one who would never step into a room full of strangers and perform on stage. But something about the idea intrigued him. Improv was all about thinking on your feet, being spontaneous, and embracing the absurd. It was the complete opposite of the controlled, predictable life he had been living. Without thinking too much about it, Alex signed up for the class. He wasn't sure what he was getting himself into, but that was the point. He was stepping into the unknown again, ready to embrace whatever came his way. It was terrifying, but that was the beauty of it. It was the kind of challenge that would force him to think and act differently. The first day of the improv class, Alex walked into the theater with a sense of nervous excitement. He was surrounded by people who seemed far more outgoing and confident than he felt. They were all chatting and laughing with each other, making jokes as if they had known each other for years. Alex, on the other hand, felt completely out of place. He was shy, reserved, and terrified of making a fool of himself in front of everyone. The instructor, Ms. Carter, was a bubbly, energetic woman who immediately made everyone feel at ease. She welcomed them all with a big smile and a few light-hearted jokes. "Improv is all about letting go of control," she explained. "It's about embracing the absurd, the unexpected, and the spontaneous. If you're afraid to fail, this is the wrong class for you. But if you're ready to laugh, learn, and grow, you're in the right place." Alex's stomach churned, but he forced himself to stay focused. The class began with simple warm-up exercises, nothing too complicated, just basic movements and vocal exercises designed to help everyone loosen up. The first exercise was a game where they had to pass an imaginary ball around the room. The catch. They had to make up a sound or gesture to go along with it. It felt ridiculous at first, but slowly, Alex started to join in. At first, his sounds were awkward, his movements stiff, but the laughter around him made it easier to let go. The more he played along, the more fun it became. By the end of the session, Alex was laughing, and he realized that he had actually enjoyed himself. He had stepped into the absurd world of improv, and instead of feeling out of place, he felt like he belonged. Over the next few weeks, Alex's confidence grew. The exercises became more challenging and the games more complex. Each time he felt unsure of himself, he reminded himself that it was okay to make mistakes. In fact, mistakes were encouraged. The entire point of improv was to embrace the unexpected, to turn even the most awkward moment into something creative and fun. One of the exercises involved creating an improvised scene with a partner. Alex was paired with Sarah, a lively woman who was quick-witted and unafraid of making bold choices. At first, Alex hesitated. He had never been the type to jump into a scene and improvise with a complete stranger. But as soon as the scene began, he let go of his fears and simply reacted. They played out a ridiculous scenario where Alex was a wizard and Sarah was a dragon trying to convince him to stop casting spells. It was absurd, funny, and completely out of the box. By the end of the scene, Alex was grinning from ear to ear. He realized that the more absurd the situation, the more fun it was. He had stopped trying to control everything and had embraced the chaos. The laughter from the class only fueled his confidence. It was exhilarating to let go of the need for perfection and simply enjoy the process. For the first time, Alex felt truly alive. He was no longer afraid to look foolish. In fact, he was beginning to embrace it. The next week, Ms. Carter announced that they would be performing a short improvised scene in front of the class. The thought of performing in front of an audience terrified Alex, but he also felt a strange sense of excitement. He wasn't sure what to expect, but he knew that this was another step in breaking free from his old self. He had learned to speak in front of a group during his public speaking course, but this was different. This was about being vulnerable, being unpredictable, and trusting in the moment. When it was Alex's turn, he stepped onto the stage with his partner James, a man who had a natural flair for comedy. The audience of classmates fell silent, and Alex could feel his heart pounding. He took a deep breath and reminded himself, it's okay to be ridiculous. It's okay to fail. The scene began, and at first, Alex felt stiff and awkward. He stumbled over his lines and fumbled with his movements. But as the scene went on, he began to relax. He allowed himself to laugh at the absurdity of the situation and played along with James's unpredictable character. The more they played, the more the audience laughed, and Alex found himself losing the fear that had held him back for so long. By the time the scene ended, the class was clapping and cheering. Alex was out of breath, but his smile stretched across his face. He had done it. He had embraced the absurdity, let go of his fear, and performed in front of an audience. The feeling of accomplishment was like nothing he had ever experienced. It wasn't just about the applause. It was about the freedom he felt in that moment, the freedom to be silly, to be imperfect, and to enjoy the process. As he walked off the stage, Alex realized something important. Life wasn't about being perfect. It wasn't about staying inside the safe, predictable box. It was about embracing the chaos, taking risks, and trusting yourself enough to make mistakes. The more he let go of control, the more alive he felt. Alex had come a long way from the man who had been afraid to try anything new. He had stepped into the unknown and found joy in the absurd. And as he left the improv class that night, he couldn't help but smile. He wasn't just stepping out of the box anymore. He was dancing around it, laughing in its face, and enjoying every second of it. Alex's life had completely changed in ways he hadn't expected. It wasn't that the world around him had transformed. It was how he had begun to see the world that had shifted. The old Alex, the one who played it safe and never took chances, was slowly becoming a distant memory. The new Alex, the one who embraced the unknown, welcomed mistakes, and found joy in the unpredictable, was beginning to shape his future. After the improv classes, Alex found that his confidence extended beyond the classroom. He had learned that life itself was an improv performance. Sometimes you had to throw away the script and just trust yourself to figure it out as you went. The fear that had once gripped him like a vice now seemed like a distant echo. At work, Alex's new mindset started to show. He had always been the quiet, dependable worker, the one who did what was asked, who never rocked the boat. But now he was beginning to speak up in meetings. He contributed more ideas, shared his opinions, and even took on projects he had once thought were beyond him. The change was subtle at first, but it didn't take long for his coworkers to notice. They started to see a different side of him, a side that was confident, willing to take risks, and ready to try new things. One afternoon, Alex's boss called him into her office. It was a routine check-in, but this time, Alex was nervous in a different way. For the first time in years, he didn't know exactly what to expect. He wasn't sure if this was going to be another conversation about his work performance, or if she was going to offer him something unexpected. "Alex," his boss began, "I've been hearing a lot of great things about your work lately. You've been really stepping up, and I've noticed that you're taking on more responsibilities. I think you're ready for something bigger." Alex's heart raced. "Bigger?" he repeated, unsure of what she meant. "Yes, I want to offer you a promotion. It's a role that requires more leadership, more decision-making, and a lot of creativity. You've shown that you can think outside the box, and I think you're ready for it." Alex was stunned. He had never imagined that something like this could happen. He had been so focused on avoiding mistakes, keeping his head down, and staying in his comfort zone. Now, all of a sudden, he was being given an opportunity to lead, to take risks, and to be in charge of something important. "Thank you," Alex said, his voice steady despite the excitement bubbling inside him. "I'm honored. I'll do my best." As he left his boss's office, Alex felt a rush of emotions. He couldn't believe it. He had taken the leap, and now he was being rewarded for it. But he also knew that this was just the beginning. The promotion wasn't the finish line. It was another challenge, another opportunity to grow, to push himself further. And this time, he wasn't afraid. In the weeks that followed, Alex dove into his new role with enthusiasm. There were times when he felt out of his depth, unsure of what the next step should be. But instead of freezing up or retreating to his old habits, he faced each challenge with curiosity. He asked questions, he learned from his mistakes, and he trusted his instincts. He wasn't perfect. There were still moments when he felt nervous or uncertain, but he no longer let those feelings control him. Outside of work, Alex's life was also changing. He had met new people through his improv classes, and some of those relationships had turned into real friendships. He wasn't just making small talk at social events anymore. He was engaging, sharing stories, laughing, and being present. It felt natural to take part in conversations, to contribute ideas, and to allow himself to be vulnerable in front of others. No longer did he need to hide behind a wall of safety. He even signed up for another adventure, this time, a weekend hiking trip with his friends from the improv class. It wasn't just about walking through the woods. It was about embracing nature, pushing his physical limits, and letting go of control. As they hiked up a steep mountain trail, Alex found himself at the front of the group, encouraging everyone along the way. He had always been the type to follow, to let others lead, but this time, he was the one encouraging others to keep going when the path got tough. By the time they reached the summit, Alex felt a sense of accomplishment, not just for completing the hike, but for how far he had come in his life. He was no longer the person who avoided challenges or let fear dictate his actions. He was someone who stepped up, who embraced the unknown, and who found joy in the journey, no matter how difficult it seemed. Back at home, Alex took some time to reflect on his transformation. He realized that stepping out of his comfort zone wasn't just about big, dramatic changes. It was about every small decision that led him to a bigger, more fulfilling life. Each day, each moment he chose to embrace the unknown, he was becoming someone new, someone stronger, more confident, and more open to the possibilities life had to offer. One evening, while sitting on his balcony, Alex gazed out at the city below. He had always found comfort in the predictability of his routine, but now, looking out at the vastness of the world, he saw something different. There were so many opportunities, so many adventures waiting just beyond his door. All it took was a little courage to step outside, to face the fear that had once held him back. Alex smiled to himself. The future no longer felt like a scary unknown. It felt like an open road, full of potential. He had learned that the world wasn't as big and terrifying as it seemed. It was full of surprises, of experiences waiting to be discovered. And the best part, he no longer had to face it alone. He had learned that embracing the absurd, stepping out of his comfort zone, and taking risks didn't just change his life. It also brought new people into it. People who shared his passion for growth, for adventure, and for living life fully. As Alex stood up and turned back inside, he realized that this was just the beginning. He had taken the first steps out of the box, and now there was no going back. He didn't need to know exactly what the future held. He was ready to face it, one step at a time. And for the first time in his life, Alex truly believed that anything was possible.